The scene opens on a quiet residential neighborhood, wrapping everything in a calm, ordinary mood. A girl approaches her older stepbrother and softly calls out to him. In the living room, he senses something is wrong and asks Shizuku what happened. With a nervous smile, he says he will do whatever she tells him from now on. She leans closer as the air turns painfully awkward, then accepts his words and says, "That is enough." A strange pendant appears, hinting that something unnatural is driving this moment. The atmosphere grows increasingly difficult to manage. He stares in confusion as he spots the pendant and cannot make sense of what is happening. The narration reveals that his stepsister, who constantly tells him to die, is trying to hypnotize him into obeying her while he sleeps. Outside, he leaves in silence with his bag, suggesting he is heading out while still reeling from the disturbing incident. He turns away with a tight expression and tells Shizuku that she is blocking his way. Seeing Shizuku standing there without a word, he nervously says her name as the pressure between them drags on. Startled, he repeats that she is in his way, while Shizuku sharply demands to know why he is still there. As she heads out, Shizuku coldly warns him not to even think about speaking to her at school. With visible discomfort, Shizuku admits she cannot stand being seen as his little sister. He forces a weak reply and says he already understands how she feels. Walking to the door, Shizuku declares that having him as a brother is the absolute worst. The narration reveals that Ichigaya Aoto is utterly hated by his younger stepsister Shizuku. The narration explains that they do not even wash their laundry together. It further reveals that he always waits to bathe until after she is finished. The narration explains that he is not even allowed to touch Shizuku's dishes. As he walks with a drained look, a girl greets him as Akun, and he reacts in surprise while someone nearby lets out a weary sigh. He recognizes the girl as Rinko, and she gently returns his morning greeting. Rinko points out that his eyes look dead again and asks if Shizuku has been bullying him, then brushes off his resistance by saying that makes it her business. Before he can process it, Rinko all of a sudden closes the gap, leaving him completely startled as she says there is a reason for that. Pressing him into an uncomfortably close moment, Rinko bluntly tells him that she really likes him, and he freezes on the spot. He awkwardly thanks her and calls her confession sincere, while internally comparing her kindness to the daily hostility he gets from his stepsister. He nervously reminds himself that when Rinko says she likes him, she means it as a friend, but he still fears misreading it romantically and confessing back. Convinced that was the right response, he hesitantly says he thinks they should just stay friends. Rinko calmly tells him that is not what she meant at all and says he should have rejected Shizuku more firmly by acting more like an older brother. He awkwardly argues that if Shizuku truly gets angry with him, she should at least hear him out, while insisting that her constant attacks might just be her way of showing affection, which leaves Rinko calling it classic tsundere behavior. He quietly repeats the idea to himself and starts wondering if Shizuku might really be a tsundere. Nearby, Shizuku all of a sudden jolts, as if she has just overheard something impossible to ignore. Flustered and irritated, Shizuku internally fixates on the word tsundere while brushing it off as ridiculous and disgusting. With a heavy sigh, he starts recalling that he first met Shizuku 12 years earlier. In the memory, young Shizuku looks utterly worn down while the young boy stares at her in stunned concern. The narration explains that after losing both of her parents, Shizuku had become haggard and exhausted. He reflects that he always tried to cheer her up, but it never went the way he hoped. The flashback shows Shizuku responding with open hostility, wishing he would disappear and lashing out so harshly that everyone around them is left uneasy, as the narration dryly notes how badly his efforts failed. Back in the present, Rinko lightly remarks that Shizuku seems to be in a good mood today, while he can only sit there in uneasy silence. He awkwardly thinks that his relationship with Shizuku is over, even if no one says it aloud. The curse makes her situation increasingly unstable. Later, evening settles in as the clock shows time passing and the quiet house exterior marks a shift in scene. While dozing alone on the sofa, he faintly hears someone repeatedly calling him Big Brother. Shizuku all of a sudden appears before him with a flushed face and softly calls him Big Brother, creating a deeply unsettling contrast with her usual hostility. Half awake, he stares in confusion and instantly thinks it cannot be Shizuku, because she would never call him that. The moment turns even more tense as she tells him he belongs to her now, making the atmosphere all of a sudden threatening. Then the illusion breaks when he sees the real Shizuku sitting nearby with a drink in one hand and a magazine in the other, looking confused herself. Startled, he realizes she is right there beside him, and his sudden movement makes the whole situation even more awkward. He jolts awake in full confusion and panic, wondering what on earth is going on around him. As he lies there pretending to sleep, he hears Shizuku quietly realize this will only work if he is actually asleep, and his alarm instantly spikes. Reading further, Shizuku discovers the answer is hypnosis, and the realization leaves her visibly flustered. Still faking sleep, he panics internally that everything is going horribly and regrets missing his chance to wake up sooner. Shizuku pauses with the book in hand, thinking it over and deciding to see what it says. The book explains that a hypnotized subject will obey completely and later forget what happened, though it warns that if hypnosis fails even once, that person can never be hypnotized again. When Shizuku says she understands, he nervously questions what she means, unable to hide his fear. A quiet exterior shot marks the passage of time, while the narration notes that Shizuku is already in her second year. He tries to calm himself by insisting no one as serious as Shizuku would ever mess around with something as absurd as hypnosis. Shizuku's expression hardens with resolve as she decides that, if hypnosis works, the tense problem involving her brother will finally be settled. She moves behind him and bluntly tells him to wake up because it is time for hypnosis, instantly destroying any hope that this was a misunderstanding. As Shizuku shifts into place, he panics that she is genuinely serious, then desperately tries to calm himself by insisting there is no way she could actually hypnotize him. One look at Shizuku's confident face shatters that hope, and he realizes she has already tested hypnosis on a friend and is fully prepared to try it on him. In his frantic inner monologue, he concludes that her reason for using hypnosis on him is so obvious that anyone could see it. His imagination jumps straight to disaster, and he fears Shizuku is planning to ruin him socially. He pictures a humiliating command that would completely destroy his life, and the thought alone sends his panic spiraling. In his mind, the consequences become catastrophic, and he can only think that his life would be over. Sitting over him, Shizuku notices he still has not woken up, then reassures herself that as long as he can see, the hypnosis should still work. The moment her face comes close, his eyes fly open in silent terror. Shizuku begins the attempt in the most straightforward way possible, telling him to watch the coin as she starts the classic hypnosis routine. Staring at the swinging coin, he is left shocked and confused, struggling to process what he is seeing. As the coin's effect takes hold, his resistance collapses, and he feels his consciousness sinking deeper and deeper. Shizuku quietly tells him that he will do whatever she says, pushing the hypnosis command straight into his fading mind. In the darkness of his thoughts, he lets out a defeated reaction and believes this is how everything ends. Reaching upward in panic, he apologizes to Shizuku as if he is already being dragged past the point of no return. With tears in his eyes, he thinks bitterly that he is supposed to be her older brother, yet he still ended up like this. A childhood memory surfaces of Shizuku, walking ahead of him as he realizes he was never able to protect her. He remembers trying, in his own clumsy way, to make her smile, holding on to the few gentle moments they once shared. Another memory follows, and he laments that not even once could he truly be dependable for her when danger appeared. In a later scene by the shore, Shizuku looks stunned and flustered as he casually calls out to her from a distance. The memory settles on their softened expressions, suggesting a quiet moment when both of them had once smiled at each other. He recalls Shizuku running ahead in the past, then the memory shifts to her alone in room at night, restless and troubled as if something has been weighing on her for a long time. Lying on the room, Shizuku stays silent and uneasy, clutching the bedding while her expression shows growing embarrassment and tension. In the present, she tells him he is ready now and then steels herself, declaring that she is about to hypnotize him. As the coin swings, Shizuku calls him her brother and insists that, more than anything else in the world, he matters most to her. Overwhelmed and blushing, Shizuku forcefully declares that he is going to care about her now. The coin keeps swinging, but instead of submission, he jolts in shock and reacts in total disbelief. He all of a sudden blurts out that he feels strange, crying out as the situation takes an unexpected turn. Shizuku is thrown off balance and falls back in alarm, demanding to know what he is doing as the moment turns chaotic and awkward. He stares in confusion and wonders whether the hypnosis failed, then right away realizes something else matters even more. Shizuku turns toward him, stunned and red-faced, and angrily demands to know what that was supposed to be. Sitting up in a daze, he wonders if the hypnosis really worked, while his sharp stare shows rising suspicion. Shizuku all of a sudden pulls out a handheld tool, and her startled expression makes the moment turn even more alarming. He stares at the object in disbelief and asks where it came from, while she nervously thinks that if the hypnosis is not working, this is going badly. With an unnervingly blank smile, Shizuku charges at him with the tool and wildly declares that she will kill him and then herself, turning the scene chaotic and dangerous. Face to face with him, she insists she is hypnotized and says it is frightening how deep it feels, while he can only respond in stunned disbelief. As her clenched fists tremble, she hesitantly asks whether he cares about her, and he gives a strained reply that sounds like reluctant agreement. Panicking inside, he realizes that if she finds out he is not actually hypnotized, he is definitely in trouble. Looking at the tense standoff in the room, he decides he has no choice but to play along. He resolves to pretend that the hypnosis has taken effect in order to calm the situation down. Flushed and sweating, he awkwardly forces out that he cares about her, clearly struggling through the admission. Shizuku freezes, face burning red, cheeks puffed in silent humiliation as irritation rises in her. She glares down at him and, in furious disbelief, says he is a shameless creep for saying that to his own sister. Overwhelmed and flustered, she lashes out, and the whole room erupts into noisy chaos. He awkwardly tries to brush it off and mutters a weak, hollow response, saying it was nothing probably. While he coughs and struggles to recover, Shizuku forces a tense smile and declares that the hypnosis seems to have worked perfectly. She coolly tests him by asking if he now recognizes her as his little sister, and he agrees with uneasy hesitation. After a long pause, she falters, trying to force herself into the next command. Aoto, still playing along, asks what is wrong and says he will do whatever she wants from now on. Then the moment breaks as she all of a sudden lunges at him and blurts out a reckless order, leaving him completely stunned. Hovering over him at dangerously close range, Shizuku anxiously asks whether his eyes are really serious, then shakily tells him to come closer, making the air turn painfully tense. Aoto stares back at Shizuku in shock and asks what she just said, while she remains seated a short distance away. The tension makes the moment unsteady to stay in. A heavy silence crashes down as neither of them knows how to move next. Shizuku abruptly changes the subject and says the fish might still be fine if he goes to the supermarket right now, while Aoto dryly notes that she was not talking about any fish. Aoto is left panicking inside as he realizes Shizuku had already gone too far trying to control him, and now things have become even stranger. When Aoto asks what kind of issue she means, Shizuku folds her arms and bluntly says it is the kind of thing people only do in very personal situations. Their cat reacts in utter disbelief, as if even it is stunned by what it just heard. Shizuku leans in with sharp suspicion and demands to know whether he is actually hypnotized or just wants trouble, while Aoto nervously insists he is completely hypnotized even if it sounds strange. Still unconvinced, Shizuku sits with her arms crossed and orders that if he is really hypnotized, then he should hurry up and do it, while Aoto awkwardly apologizes and she calls him a creep even under hypnosis. Aoto draws a line for himself and decides that this would be way too much, no matter what. Aoto steels himself and insists that even if they are not blood relatives, he still wants to treat Shizuku properly as her brother. He locks in that resolve and decides that no matter what happens, he has to avoid going further. He freezes and goes blank for a moment, and Shizuku watches him in confusion. Desperately trying to explain himself, Aoto admits he has no experience and does not really know how to do what she asked. Panic instantly takes over, and he backtracks at once, blurting out that it was just a joke and apologizing again and again. Aoto nervously argues that there are many ways people handle that kind of thing, so if she gives him no details, he has no idea what she expects. Flustered and refusing to meet his eyes, Shizuku quietly mutters that the details are not the issue. As Shizuku awkwardly insists she does not want anything forceful or improper, Aoto all of a sudden realizes what she actually means. He quickly says that in any case he will not make a move unless she clearly tells him what she wants, while insisting he is too scrambled to think straight. Shizuku, red-faced and sweating, demands to know if he is really hypnotized at all, while inwardly admitting that she is only pretending to believe him. Aoto tells himself he has finally cornered Shizuku, convinced that someone as proud as her would be too embarrassed to explain what she wants in detail. Shizuku all of a sudden breaks, then blurts out that if things have come this far over this issue, she would rather die, and angrily tells him not to treat his life so carelessly. Aoto fires back that if she wants him to act, then she has to explain exactly what she wants, while Shizuku protests that he is the real pervert here and he snaps that he knows. The situation becomes uncomfortable. As the atmosphere grows even more awkward, Shizuku angrily tells him to figure it out himself and insists she already said enough, while Aoto protests that no one could understand that and starts to wonder if he pushed her too far. Shizuku goes silent for a moment, then warns that she will only say this once and orders him to listen very carefully. Aoto is certain there is no way Shizuku could really say something that embarrassing out loud. The room turns still as the tension sharpens, and Shizuku braces herself to force out the words. To Aoto's shock, Shizuku all of a sudden gives far more detail than expected, describing an aggressive and deeply inappropriate situation while blushing furiously and struggling through the humiliation. Aoto panics instantly, blurting out that this is no time for jokes and recoiling at how extreme and disturbing her description sounds. Shizuku flushes with irritation and calls his reaction unbelievably lame and creepy, then snaps at him not to wear such a smug, self-satisfied look. Aoto tries to steady himself, thinking that since Shizuku explicitly told him to do this, he is supposedly obligated to act under the spell, yet her request sounds absurd, and he tells himself to calm down because she is acting far more extreme than expected. Shizuku angrily says he is the last person she ever wanted to hear that from, then insists that should be enough for him already, and tells the pervert to just do it. Shizuku, all of a sudden, starts moving toward him, and the room drops into a brief, stunned silence as Aoto jolts in alarm. Throwing her arms wide, Shizuku says she cannot wait any longer and orders him to come to her, while Aoto is left wondering if she is seriously expecting some overdramatic gesture. Aoto awkwardly tries to justify the situation to himself by thinking that maybe siblings really can handle this kind of thing. As the moment turns dangerously intense, Aoto abruptly says he will do it, while Shizuku stares in shock and demands to know whether he was never hypnotized at all and whether he has a death wish. Aoto realizes he has no escape and grimly concludes that it is over. In his imagination, Aoto sees himself trapped between two awful fates, bitterly asking what kind of ridiculous game this is as he laments that if he disobeys he is finished, and if he obeys the humiliation will destroy him. He follows that thought to its end, deciding that if the choice is between emotional collapse and actual physical danger, he has to choose the former. Shizuku cries out and demands that Aoto choose the latter option, while Aoto braces himself in panic as the pressure finally peaks. Aoto protests that she was the one who told him to do this, then desperately argues that this kind of thing is wrong for siblings. As he moves in close, Aoto nervously says Shizuku's name, and the moment turns intensely uncomfortable. In a frantic, unstable effort to force himself forward, Aoto blurts out that Shizuku is not his little sister but someone else entirely, while internally screaming that he wants to die. Shizuku stares at him in disbelief, says he is seriously messed up in the head, and then, with shaken embarrassment, admits the twisted act somehow sounds dramatic to her. The scene becomes too charged to stay calm in. As the moment grows even more awkward, Shizuku gives in with tense resignation, and the whole situation turns deeply uncomfortable. Aoto steels himself and declares that he will get this over with. Just as the two are on the verge of crossing the line, a voice from home announces an arrival, and both of them jolt in shock. Aoto recoils in alarm and blurts out that their mother is home. Aoto is snapped back to reality, as Shizuku sharply tells him to listen up, calling him a worthless brother while he recoils in confusion and pain. In a panic, Shizuku orders him to forget what just happened the next time she hypnotizes him, and insists that when that happens he must fall in line with her plan, while Aoto shakily says he understands. Their mother arrives home sounding exhausted, and the mood changes instantly. Seeing the two of them sitting quietly together, their mother remarks that this is unusual. Shizuku right away agrees and bitterly says Aoto is disgusting, wishing he would fall into despair and disappear, then nervously adds that his presence might somehow rub off on her. Their mother gently tells Shizuku to stop and says she thought the two of them had been getting along well. Aoto freezes in surprise and wonders why he is sitting on the sofa, while Shizuku stays silent and tense. As they face each other across the room, Aoto realizes their relationship was supposed to have ended there. But then he understands that hypnosis has somehow made everything begin again through a strange twist. Time passes in heavy silence, with the clock ticking as the house settles into an uneasy calm. Aoto tenses and quietly pleads with himself, his expression tightening with unease. He stares at his computer screen, where his writing project is open, then reaches for the mouse as if forcing himself to focus. The screen shows story prompts about Aohito having a crush on his tsundere stepsister and another question tied to childhood resentment, hinting at the conflict weighing on him. He introduces himself as Ichigaya Aoto, a high school student and light novel author, while slumping in exhaustion and letting out a tired sigh. He explains that although he is a light novel author, he is not famous at all and sees himself as a disposable writer who could vanish at any time. He reflects bitterly that reality is not always kind, and that a web novel he wrote as a hobby was adapted into a book, but things did not become easier because of it. Hearing a sound, Aoto looks up and sees Shizuku standing there, then hesitantly starts to say her name as the air tightens. Shizuku stands in silence with a flushed, troubled face, and when Aoto asks what is wrong, she only mutters that it is already very late. Fighting through her embarrassment, Shizuku thrusts a 5-yen coin toward him and urgently tells him to look at it. Aoto gives a cautious smile and agrees, while it becomes clear he is still pretending to be hypnotized because he fears what will happen if Shizuku learns the truth. Shizuku declares that he will go back to being the big brother who cares about her, trying to drag the situation back under her control. Aoto nervously plays along and claims he is hypnotized, while inwardly admitting it is a desperate lie. The interaction turns into something neither wanted. Aoto panics that refusing could trigger another outburst, so he blurts out that he does. Shizuku violently rejects the way he says it, angrily calling him disgusting and demanding to know what she is even supposed to hear. Declaring that the hypnosis clearly went wrong, Shizuku drags him away despite his startled question about where they are going. As she pulls him to the house, Aoto realizes with alarm that she is taking him to Shizuku's bedroom. Once inside, Shizuku orders him to sit, and Aoto obeys while watching her uneasily as she heads for the shelf. Shizuku thrusts a book at him and orders him to read page 16. When Aoto hesitates, Shizuku pushes the demand harder and says he should just read it if he is really hypnotized, pressuring him with the harsh threat. Aoto forces a weak smile and tells himself that reading a book is still better than being pushed into something even worse. He looks down at the cover and realizes with rising dread that the book is about a younger sister and an older brother in an inappropriate setup. Aoto breaks into a cold sweat as he recognizes it as his own light novel. In shock, he wonders why Shizuku has his book and panics that no one except their mother was supposed to know he writes light novels. Shizuku coldly demands to know what he is waiting for and orders him to hurry up and read, while Aoto hesitates and says he has a question. Instead of reading, Aoto nervously asks why she even has a light novel like that, and Shizuku right away presses him on what he means by that. Shizuku stares at him in disbelief and asks if he is mocking what she considers her sacred book. Aoto notices the shelf full of related merchandise and realizes with alarm that she is a massive fan of the series. Trying to stay careful, Aoto asks if Shizuku has read that book before. With flushed pride, Shizuku says she has read it 10 times, collected every bonus item and drama CD, and even owns all the tapestries and keychains. Aoto all of a sudden cries out for his sister in panic, overwhelmed by the words he is being forced to say. From across the room, Shizuku notices he is bleeding badly and asks if he is okay, but when he insists he is fine, she coldly tells him to stop delaying and read page 16. Aoto stares at the page in disbelief and realizes with dread that she means that exact passage. As he reads, Aoto is mortified by the painfully awkward line praising Shizuku and saying something ridiculous, while internally cursing himself for ever writing something so awful. Shizuku blushes and smugly clarifies that she wants him to read it out loud, making the humiliation even worse. Aoto hurriedly agrees to read, then awkwardly tries to justify the writing style by saying light novels can have weird scenes, but Shizuku crushes that excuse by reminding him he is supposed to be hypnotized. Sweating heavily, Aoto desperately tells himself to calm down and just read aloud, convincing himself that this is still better than letting things get even worse. He forces himself to continue and repeats the embarrassing line about Shizuku, while inwardly wishing someone would put him out of his misery. After a brief pause, Shizuku softly echoes the family address, and the air between them tightens. Blushing intensely, Shizuku follows along from the book and shyly adds the next line, then reacts in flustered disbelief that he is actually still reading. Aoto trembles at the humiliating scene, but Shizuku, red-faced and sweating, sharply orders him to keep going. Fighting through his embarrassment, Aoto reluctantly continues and says the next line, then awkwardly refers to it in an immature way. Outside, the calm view of the house clashes with the painfully awkward exchange still unfolding inside. The spell takes hold in a way no one anticipated. Aoto all of a sudden rises in alarm, overwhelmed as the interaction becomes far too inappropriate for him to endure. Aoto finally snaps and says he cannot take it anymore, while Shizuku jolts in shock and calls out to him in panic. As their struggle escalates behind the window, Aoto insists they have to stop the bleeding, while still failing to grasp just how hellish this whole ordeal has become. Still flustered and bleeding, Aoto mechanically continues the line and says this would become part of his daily routine with Shizuku from now on. The scene shifts away from the house to the school grounds, marking the end of that unbearable moment. Later at school, Aoto sits at his desk exhausted and lets out a drained sigh. Aoto reflects that it has already been a week since he started pretending to be hypnotized, and with Shizuku doing this almost every day around 10 o'clock, he feels himself nearing his limit. A girl notices how lifeless Aoto looks again and points out his dead-eyed expression. Aoto recognizes Rinko as she approaches with a knowing smile, catching him off guard in the classroom. When Aoto tries to shut her out, Rinko calmly says it is none of his business if she still worries about him and likes him a little. Leaning in close, Rinko suggests that something must have happened with Shizuku again, leaving Aoto visibly shaken. Aoto quickly insists that nothing happened at all, while thinking that this childhood friend of his is far sharper than she looks. As Aoto keeps denying everything, Rinko casually remarks that something definitely happened, and that it was serious. Rinko teases him by pointing out that his nose twitches whenever he lies, making him freeze on the spot. She right away softens the jab and says she was only kidding. Even so, Rinko studies him closely and concludes from his reaction that something really did happen. Aoto recoils in disbelief and accuses her of tricking him, while she coolly asks why he is acting like a child and leaning on her as if she were his mother. She mockingly says that, with the situation, he looks more like a troublesome child than anything else, and the moment turns even more uncomfortable. Aoto all of a sudden feels a chill crawl through him and senses that something is very wrong. Looking across the classroom, he realizes the source of that ominous feeling as attention shifts toward him. He sees Shizuku glaring with silent fury, and her expression makes it clear she is absolutely livid. Rinko notices Shizuku staring at them and nervously warns that if Shizuku hears too much, someone might end up in serious trouble, then openly admits that she is the one involved. Before Aoto can recover, Shizuku appears behind him with a terrifying smile and coldly tells her lousy brother to come with her for a moment, leaving him horrified. Aoto right away gives in and awkwardly agrees, but Rinko tries to stop Shizuku by saying Aoto still has class duties to handle. Shizuku sharply grabs Rinko's wrist, and the confrontation instantly turns tense as both girls lock eyes. Rinko tells Shizuku that she is being a little too forceful, calling out the pressure she is putting on Aoto. Rinko keeps provoking Shizuku, pointing out how frantic she is over Aoto and suggesting she only noticed because she was watching the other girls around him so closely, while Aoto is left stunned by how far she pushes it. After a heavy silence, the two girls glare at each other face to face and trade blunt insults, with Shizuku calling Rinko a pig and Rinko firing back by calling her flat. As the hostility peaks, Aoto can only sit there wishing he could vanish from the scene entirely. Shizuku abruptly declares that this is the last time Rinko will pull something like this, then orders her lousy brother to come with her, leaving Rinko shocked. In the hallway, Aoto nervously asks what Shizuku wants from him, trying to sound calm despite the obvious danger in the air. Shizuku brings out a 5-yen coin and tells him to watch it, while inwardly deciding that this is the only way to handle him. She pressures him to say he will never bring another person over again and is now hypnotized, and Aoto, sweating heavily, goes along with it while admitting to himself that he is lying. Shizuku all of a sudden orders him to pin her against the wall, and Aoto can only respond in total confusion. When he hesitates, Shizuku angrily calls him pathetic and insists he was supposed to say he cared about her more than that other woman, making her frustration and embarrassment impossible to miss. As panic sets in, Shizuku urgently tells him to hurry up and do it, while Aoto realizes that if she notices he is not truly hypnotized, he is finished. Aoto realizes he has no choice and forces himself to act. He all of a sudden pins Shizuku against the wall, leaving her stunned as the moment turns dangerously tense. He blurts out that he cares about her far more than the other woman, trying to match the line she demanded. Shizuku panics and protests that they are brother and sister, and he cannot say something like that, while inwardly wondering why he keeps resisting her every move. When he stops there, Shizuku is left staring at him in confusion, as if she had expected him to keep going. Aoto hesitates and scrambles internally, trying to guess what kind of answer she wants to hear next. He awkwardly insists that none of that matters right now and says it is just the two of them, but even Shizuku finds the line deeply creepy. As he keeps the act going, Aoto internally cringes at how weak the line sounds and berates himself for failing to come up with anything better despite being a light novel author. He starts to panic that these fake dramatic lines will only expose his act and make Shizuku see through him. Aoto realizes he has completely messed up and fears that even Shizuku would never accept such an embarrassingly bad line. Shizuku is completely overwhelmed as Aoto's confession lands harder than expected, and she blurts out that she cares about her brother very much. Aoto realizes he has unexpectedly struck a nerve and thinks he is lucky she has lost her composure enough not to question him. In her flustered state, Shizuku throws herself against him, leaving Aoto startled by how all of a sudden the pressure spikes. Shizuku desperately insists that she will not let another girl take him away, and declares that she refuses to hand him over. Aoto assumes she must be talking about Rinko, and awkwardly reminds himself that his relationship with her is not like that anyway. Shizuku orders him to ask that girl out after school, and then tell her that he values his little sister more than her, leaving Aoto stunned. Before Aoto can properly object, Shizuku all of a sudden brings out a power drill, and his protest dies in his throat. Faced with that threat, Aoto forces a cheerful act and says he will do it, even adding exaggerated praise about his little sister. Shizuku, still flushed, coldly instructs him to be as harsh and dismissive as possible when he rejects the girl, while Aoto internally concludes that women are terrifying. As he stares at his phone, Aoto nervously convinces himself that even if his message sounds awful, Rinko probably will not be too bothered since it is her they are talking about. Aoto nervously sends Rinko a message asking if she has time after school because he has something to talk to her about, and Rinko right away notices it in class. The effect of the spell pushes her past her limit. After school, Aoto waits at a cafe while Rinko hurries over to meet him. Rinko arrives and apologizes for making him wait, while Aoto quietly takes in how different she looks today. She appears in a softer, more dressed-up outfit, clearly having put effort into her appearance for this meeting. Rinko asks if she looks nice today, and Aoto awkwardly but honestly admits that she definitely does. When she asks him to rate her, Aoto gives her a high score and says she looks great. Blushing with happiness, Rinko points out that it has been a while since Aoto invited her out somewhere. Aoto hesitates and awkwardly claims it has not really been that long. Rinko argues that it has been a long time since they last went out, while Aoto denies that this is even a date and says they see each other every day anyway. Rinko blushes and insists that even if they see each other every day, girls still want to feel specially treated from time to time. As she confidently backs up her point, Aoto quietly reacts while stirring his drink and taking in what she said. Aoto all of a sudden grows alarmed and asks what she is doing. While the two sit apart in the cafe, Aoto panics internally as he realizes this no longer feels like a casual outing and regrets letting things go this far. Aoto is overwhelmed by the thought that he is somehow in the middle of confessing to a childhood friend he has known for over 10 years, while Rinko happily sips her drink and talks casually. He warns her that even though he told her to act naturally so Shizuku would not suspect anything, she is taking it too far, and in his confusion he blurts out that she keeps talking and acting as if she has feelings for him. Rinko right away denies it in a panic, but when he questions that reaction, she blurts out that she did not mean it like that and becomes even more flustered. Aoto desperately tells Rinko to close her eyes and cover her ears, while she stares at him in confusion and he awkwardly insists she just do it because he is reaching his limit. The magical effect on her grows harder to contain. Aoto steels himself and calls out to Shizuku, saying he can hear her, then declares that everything that happened was part of the act and insists that she is the one he cares about while ordering her not to move. The curse deepens its grip on her condition. Aoto quietly addresses Rinko and asks her to stop. His eyes sharpen as he quickly takes out a notebook, while Rinko lowers her gaze and opens her bag in confusion. While riding in a hurry, Aoto hears Rinko complain that he is being cruel. Rinko says he told her to close her eyes, so she got excited and assumed he had prepared some kind of surprise for her. Aoto shows her the note, revealing that Shizuku is nearby and that he can see her headphones. Rinko opens her eyes in total shock as the message sinks in. Aoto tells her she does not need to answer because he can already tell from her expression that she understands. He reflects that Rinko always looks relaxed and carefree, but she's actually extremely sharp and notices almost everything. Aoto writes that he only went along with Shizuku's little game for the moment and asks Rinko to help him figure out what to do next. Aoto braces himself, thinking what he is about to say to Rinko may be harsh enough to damage their friendship. He reminds himself that Rinko is perceptive and may understand what is really happening. Aoto forces himself to believe Rinko will realize his words and actions are being directed by Shizuku, and that she will stay calm. With a strained face, Aoto tells Rinko that he cares about Shizuku more than her. Rinko quietly says she understands, casually reaching for her drink. Seeing how calm she looks, Aoto begins to relax and thinks this steady reaction is exactly what he expected from Rinko. That confidence shatters the instant Rinko all of a sudden chokes on her drink, and he realizes this is not going smoothly at all. Flustered and coughing, Rinko repeats that he is choosing Shizuku over her, then blurts out in a rattled haze that Shizuku is a mess. As the scene starts spiraling, Aoto urgently tells Rinko to calm down and offers her his handkerchief. The moment turns painfully awkward when Rinko pants that she spilled on herself, making the atmosphere even worse. Aoto trembles and fights to hold himself together, clearly buckling under the pressure of the moment. He hurriedly writes Rinko a note, revealing that Shizuku is the one forcing him to say all of this. After reading it, Rinko quietly asks if that is really true, her expression hardening into seriousness. Rinko says she understands now and admits she is shocked that Shizuku pushed things this far and made him say all of it. With a sharp stare, Rinko asks Aoto if he truly cares about Shizuku. Aoto nervously answers that he does, forcing himself to say that he cares about her. Rinko reaches for her cup and, sounding shaken, admits she sees what is happening but still cannot grasp how Shizuku pulled it off. As Rinko rises from her seat, Aoto anxiously calls after her and asks where she is going. Rinko calmly says she is heading right over there to get some answers. With a tense smile, Rinko warns that eavesdropping is a bad habit and pointedly asks if this is the start of a final confrontation. Rinko falls silent, her face tightening as the full weight of the situation settles in. She leaves the table and heads straight for the place where Shizuku has been listening, while Aoto stays behind in alarm. In the strange silence, something spills, making the sudden confrontation feel even heavier. Aoto panics and calls out for Rinko to stop, warning that she is taking this too far. Rinko sharply tells Akun to be quiet, leaving him stunned where he stands. She coldly says she is not going too far at all, especially compared to what Shizuku has already done to her. Shizuku fires back that Rinko is just a pathetic plain woman and says nothing she does will change anything. Rinko right away calls for her older brother to come over, and when he hesitates, she urgently orders him to hurry. Her brother appears in confusion, and Rinko closes in on him as she calls out to him directly. With a tight smile, Rinko asks how he feels about her, turning the moment into a direct and dangerous challenge. Shizuku demands to know why he told that plain woman. Under pressure, her brother hesitates, then admits that he cares about her. Rinko answers that she cares about him too, making Shizuku go completely still in shock. Rinko presses Shizuku directly and asks whether Akun's feelings for her are actually real. Shizuku instantly insists that of course they are. The note reveals that Shizuku made him say that, while Rinko calmly says there is no need to lie. As the truth starts surfacing, Shizuku accuses Rinko of making everything up, while the others freeze in surprise. Rinko says she does not know what kind of trick Shizuku used, but forcing this on him just because he cannot be honest about his long-held feelings is unacceptable. Rinko bluntly tells Shizuku to stop and says this behavior is awful, warning that dragging Akun into her cruel game and attacking anyone who gets close to him has gone too far. Shizuku snaps back that Rinko knows nothing about her. Shizuku bitterly says she does not care why some coward who cannot even express her own feelings is trying to interfere. Rinko quietly answers that she has always expressed her feelings. Rinko repeats it with unwavering certainty that she always has. A string of memories shows Rinko staying by him through different points in life, proving she was always there. Aoto reacts in stunned disbelief as he realizes she is talking about Rinko. Shizuku lunges forward and screams for them to stop, refusing to let the moment go any further. She furiously declares that he has belonged to her from the very beginning and that she will not let anyone take him. Rinko steps in calmly, calling that possessive attitude childish and saying it genuinely infuriates her. Shizuku leans close and directly asks whether he likes her, and Aoto nervously admits that he does. With Rinko watching in the background, Shizuku pushes further and asks whether he truly has feelings for her. Aoto hesitantly answers yes, clearly under pressure as the tension tightens around him. Shaken and flushed, Aoto forces himself to admit that he has feelings for her. Shizuku smugly frames it as proof that she is the only girl he cares about, insisting that when two people want the same person, one side has already won. She then claims that she and Aoto already share a special bond, trying to secure her place over Rinko. Rinko cuts in coldly, calling it a fake relationship and warning that once this is over, only one of them will remain by Aoto's side. Shizuku erupts in rage and refuses to accept it, shouting that this cannot be allowed to end. In the darkness, Rinko firmly declares that it will end. With calm resolve, Rinko says she will break whatever hold Shizuku has over him. A note confirms that Aoto was made to say those words, and Rinko realizes she had already understood most of what was happening. Shizuku warns that exposing her now would only leave Aoto badly hurt, insisting that Rinko still does not understand enough. Shizuku coldly tells Rinko to enjoy herself for now because once she feels secure, she will be dragged straight down. Aoto realizes that if Rinko tells Shizuku he was never truly hypnotized, his relationship with Shizuku will be over, and if she learns the truth about the hypnosis, everything will collapse. He understands that this is exactly why Rinko wants to expose the hypnosis, and he sees that she has already noticed he is pretending, and that this reveals the nature of Shizuku's control. Even though he thinks things would be easier if all this hypnosis nonsense ended, Aoto is shaken by how sharply his chest aches at the thought. Shizuku notices his tears and lightly apologizes, admitting she may have gone a little too far. Aoto is left stunned when Rinko all of a sudden apologizes first, saying he is probably angry but she wants to say sorry now. In a sudden move, Rinko closes the distance and the moment turns intensely awkward, leaving Aoto frozen in shock. Shizuku stares in disbelief, unable to process what she is seeing. The confrontation explodes as Shizuku demands to know what Rinko is doing, while Rinko shouts for her to get away from him. Aoto can only stare blankly, flushed and overwhelmed, with no idea how to respond. Aoto reels in shock, realizing that Rinko just crossed a line he never expected and leaving him completely shaken. He reminds himself that Shizuku is his sister and that this is the one boundary he absolutely cannot allow himself to cross. Aoto condemns himself as unfit as a brother, admits that he is weak and says he understands that better than anyone. Through tears, Shizuku insists she will never let Rinko have her brother and declares that Rinko will never stop caring about him. The scene shifts to Tokyo, at the offices of Drive Publications. Someone addresses Ichinose-sensei, and a quiet response asks what is needed. A woman asks if she may ask a question, while Aoto nervously tries to avoid her. She asks him to remind her when their deadline was, and he panics as he admits it was today. She calmly asks how long it has been since their last meeting and whether it has already been 1 month, then wonders if he still has the draft for his new work. Overwhelmed, Aoto launches into a desperate apology, while she coolly asks what is wrong. Aoto admits he really could not help it, saying so much has happened lately that he has had no time to think. The confession hangs heavily in the air as Aoto stands frozen, crushed by everything that has happened. Shizuku all of a sudden calls his words disgusting, and demands to know why he is starting to blush all of a sudden. Aoto painfully reflects that even if they may not be related by blood, he still ended up crossing a forbidden line with Shizuku. He realizes Shizuku began controlling him even more often after that, while Rinko started avoiding him ever since the incident. Shizuku quietly calls him brother and apologizes for what she did earlier, while the mood turns subdued. She hesitates and says that if he had not been under her control, she is sure he would hate her. Aoto can only answer that he cannot really say, then gently tells her not to worry about it. He then assures Shizuku that he could never hate her, but reminds her that he is her brother. Sitting in heavy silence, Shizuku struggles to speak, then says she was truly glad that he was the one. Shizuku quietly says that the one who became her brother was Aoto. She explains that after their mother and father died and she had almost given up on life, Aoto was still the only one who stayed by her side even when she pushed everyone else away. Shizuku says this is something she can only tell him. Aoto realizes she is speaking this honestly because she believes he is still hypnotized, but deep down it is her true feeling. Under the night sky, her gratitude reaches him as she sincerely thanks him. Holding him closely, Shizuku admits that she truly cares about him and the moment becomes painfully tense. She says that maybe one day she will be able to tell him all of this without hypnosis, while Oto can only answer vaguely. The scene shifts as someone impatiently asks whether Ichino-sensei is even listening, and Aoto snaps back awkwardly while the other person complains that he still looks half asleep. He is then told that Saruno-sensei has started turning things around and is becoming more successful than him. A report adds that Inazuma Publications is one of Drive's biggest rivals, and that their most popular writer is Sakamoto Suzuki. The editor insists Sarano-sensei writes romance so powerfully because he understands intense emotions, saying readers are drawn to a guarded girl who only opens up to the protagonist. Aoto quietly repeats the words real-life emotional intensity, and they hit him harder than he expected. Then he all of a sudden snaps, insisting he knows absolutely nothing about that, leaving the other person momentarily stunned. The editor fires back that guys like him always hide their feelings behind flimsy excuses, and Aoto protests that the comment is unbelievably rude. Pushing even harder, the editor says if Aoto wants to become a famous mangaka, he has to stop suppressing himself and start digging up whatever he keeps buried, while Aoto recoils at how brutal he is being. The editor tells him to hurry and turn that into a new premise, or better yet, a full manuscript, and Aoto reluctantly agrees. The conversation ends with Aoto walking home alone through the quiet neighborhood, still heavy with everything he just heard. Lost in thought, he keeps replaying the editor's formula in his head. A girl with that kind of trait, a real-life relationship angle, and an outrageous premise, while feeling none of it is something he can simply steal. The moment he gets home, Shizuku greets him with open hostility and mockingly welcomes back her useless brother. Agitated and intense, Shizuku thrusts a coin toward him and orders him to stare at it, demanding through hypnosis that he focus only on her, and the mood turns disturbingly wrong. Aoto instantly latches onto the idea of an outrageous premise, the editor's words crashing back into his mind. As the coin sways in front of him, Shizuku nervously asks if she can ask him something, and Aoto hesitantly tells her to go ahead. The discomfort between them rises without warning. Aoto's mind instantly tags it as a real-life relationship angle. Caught in the moment, Aoto tells himself of course he cares about her, as the fantasy swells into something even more dangerously personal. Shizuku lights up with giddy delight and says she feels the same, while the air turns painfully close. Aoto is jolted by the realization that this is exactly the kind of character the editor meant. He panics, recoils from his own thoughts, and angrily demands to know what he is even thinking, while Shizuku calls out to him in confusion. In a burst of frantic inspiration, Aoto turns it into a premise about a stepsister who hypnotizes him every day and makes his life emotionally unbearable. Shizuku quietly says she knew he was angry with her, and Aoto is caught completely off guard. Shizuku blushes and nervously says she acted that way because he got close to another woman right in front of her, making the moment painfully awkward. She insists he has to believe her and says she had no other choice. Holding tightly to him, Shizuku says she couldn't let that woman take him away from her, and Oto is left flustered and overwhelmed. As Aoto all of a sudden gets another nosebleed, Shizuku panics and cries out to her brother in alarm. Aoto explains in narration that ever since that incident, Shizuku has grown even more aggressive, and her repeated pressure has left both his body and mind exhausted, despite her insisting she is not angry and telling him not to worry. Later on the street, someone calls out to Aoto, and he turns at the sound of his sister's voice. In a tense close moment, Shizuku pressures him to confirm that he cares about her more than the other girl and demands reassurance that he will never betray her after what happened between them earlier. Aoto realizes the obvious answer is yes, but fears what might happen if he keeps playing along and decides he has to answer carefully. As Shizuku waits for his reply with a blush and an anxious stare, Aoto braces himself while the tension becomes impossible to ignore. In a panicked rush, Aoto assures her he would never do that and says she already knows how deeply he cares for her, which makes Shizuku melt in embarrassed relief. Aoto notices a message and tells himself he has to endure this for now, stay careful, and find a way out before things spiral even further, while Shizuku clings to him and begs him not to go. He checks the phone and sees a message from Yoshizawa confirming a book signing event for his friend's series and asking him to let them know whether he can make it. Aoto reacts to the message and asks what is wrong, but Shizuku shyly brushes it off as nothing. His thoughts jump to the book release and the upcoming signing, as the scene shifts to the published volume on display. Aoto freezes in alarm, then tries to calm himself by thinking that even if Shizuku is a fan, there is no way the school's most admired girl would show up at something that niche. He bitterly recalls his own cynical belief that fans only care about the work, never the author behind it. Forcing a nervous smile, Aoto tells Shizuku that the author of the series she loves has a signing event soon, then awkwardly asks if she is not planning to go, leaving her puzzled. Shizuku instantly snaps that there is no way she would miss it, and Aoto is crushed on the spot. When Aoto asks why she all of a sudden cares so much, Shizuku says she was just curious, then sighs and admits she already knows exactly what he is thinking. Blushing but direct, Shizuku asks Aoto to go there with her, and the request leaves him completely cornered. The atmosphere stays charged as neither of them says a word. The tense moment stretches on without changing the core event. The exchange leaves both of them visibly shaken. The silence between them grows harder and harder to endure. The weight of the moment hangs there with no release. The scene remains trapped in uneasy stillness. The atmosphere stays charged as neither of them says a word. The situation remains unresolved as the pressure keeps rising. The exchange leaves both of them visibly shaken. The tension carries forward without ever truly breaking. Aoto notices there are strangely few people around, then forces himself to focus and dismisses it as his imagination. He convinces himself that he is in too deep now, so he should act like the main character and take her on an absurdly over-the-top outing. Seeing her flushed expression, he nervously wonders whether his desperate performance is actually working. He all of a sudden bursts out with exaggerated confidence and vows to escort her anywhere, whether it is a classy restaurant or a famous brand shop, calling her his princess as she jerks in surprise. Shizuku, blushing and hesitant, says that if that is the case, maybe they should go somewhere inappropriate, making the moment instantly far more awkward. Aoto panics inside, realizing he has to keep acting through an impossible situation while the book signing is still waiting ahead. He steels himself and decides he is ready for this no matter what happens. Moving closer, he treats her with exaggerated reverence and calls her a precious girl, leaving her startled by the sudden intensity. As he catches and steadies her dramatically, he insists that the best part should be saved for last, and she shyly agrees while the tension spikes even higher. Aoto tells himself he only has to keep up the act a little longer until the signing, even though the embarrassment is driving him to the brink. Aoto says he already has a reservation at a restaurant and urges her to come with him, and she quietly agrees as they pass an area that makes the outing feel even more awkward. As he leads her by the hand, Shizuku all of a sudden asks where they are going, then quickly apologizes, revealing her uncertainty. The scene shifts across the city as they head toward their next stop. They arrive at an elegant restaurant, and Shizuku nervously points out that it looks very expensive, but Aoto brushes it off by saying his older brother's workplace discount will cover it. Once their food arrives, neither of them can say much, and the silence at the table turns heavy with embarrassment. Shizuku blushes and admits that being there with him makes her truly happy right now. Aoto is shaken by her words and thinks that these feelings, and even the outing itself, are all a lie, then remembers her claim that it is all part of the hypnosis and struggles to answer. He finally says her name, but the rest catches in his throat as the tension at the table becomes impossible to escape. Flustered and red-faced, Aoto blurts out that he is her big brother and tells her not to worry about it, clinging to that role as his only answer. Shizuku goes quiet for a moment, then gives a small uneasy agreement, leaving the air between them muted and unresolved. Shizuku shyly reminds him that it is almost time for the book signing, but then says that if he is not feeling well, they could go somewhere else instead, making the moment all of a sudden much more awkward. Aoto is hit by a surge of panic and pain at the suggestion, while she calls out in alarm and asks what is wrong. He bolts away and claims he has a terrible stomachache and needs the toilet, telling her to go on ahead to the book signing without him, but she is stunned and asks if he is serious. As he runs, Aoto apologizes to Shizuku in his head for lying to her and admits he simply does not want her to destroy him. Once alone, he exhales in relief and tells himself he just needs to get away from her and expose the secret plan before heading to the signing. Shizuku all of a sudden appears behind him and anxiously asks if her big brother is okay, catching him completely off guard. Aoto stammers out her name and asks why she followed him into the stall area, while Shizuku softly says she came because she was worried. Forcing a strained smile, Aoto thanks her but awkwardly explains that taking care of private business in front of his little sister is a little too much. Shizuku insists she is genuinely worried, and her earnest expression leaves Aoto flustered as the situation turns even more uncomfortably personal. Aoto tells her to just leave and says he will be fine, But Shizuku refuses, says she will wait outside and stand guard, and scolds him for being selfish. Shizuku corners Aoto and argues that people are most vulnerable in the bathroom, claiming there have even been bear attacks there, so she insists he should let her protect him. Aoto nervously points out that they are in the middle of Shibuya, so bears are probably not a realistic concern. He snaps at her to be quiet, panicking as the situation slips even further out of control. Flushed and defensive, Shizuku insists that this exact kind of carelessness is how people get killed, then awkwardly tries to push past his objection. Still blushing, she argues that it is only common sense for a little sister to watch over her older brother in a situation like this, insisting not everyone would see something wrong with it. Aoto desperately begs her to stop, but Shizuku keeps crowding closer and insists that he should just let her help. Grabbing onto him, Shizuku demands to know what matters more, his bathroom emergency or Ichino-sensei's book signing, while Aoto yells at her to calm down. As Aoto calls her crazy, Shizuku breaks down in frustration and says there is no way she can possibly choose between the two. Shizuku argues that he can use the toilet anytime, but Ichino-sensei's signing is happening right now, and she laments that missing it would cost her only chance at a signed book and a bonus epilogue. Looking embarrassed and torn, Shizuku asks if he will at least let her watch over him tomorrow instead. Tearful and flustered, Aoto forces himself to accept the sacrifice for the greater good, and Shizuku happily takes that as a yes. Shizuku declares that she will endure this painful choice and insists it really is difficult, while Aoto shouts that she does not have to keep saying it. Aoto urgently tells her that if things get really bad she should run away right away, then orders her to hurry and go. As Shizuku rushes off saying she will get the signature right away, Aoto reminds her to keep her promise to show him what happens, then sharply tells her to lower her voice. Left alone, Aoto exhales in relief and thinks he never expected all that, but now things are finally back on track. With only 30 minutes until he has to meet Yoshizawa-san, Aoto steels himself and decides he has no choice but to finish everything within that window. The scene shifts to the city outside as time closes in on the next appointment. At the venue, someone asks whether Ichi-sensei has arrived yet, and a staff member apologetically says he should be there soon. Growing irritated, the waiting woman clicks her tongue and complains about what he is doing, stressing that this is his very first book signing. A voice all of a sudden calls out with an apology for being late as the door swings open. The waiting woman scolds Ichino-sensei for being late and warns that they are out of time. Ichino-sensei, revealed to be dressed as a woman, calmly says they should begin the signing now. From across the room, Aoto freezes in shock as Ichino-sensei smiles at him with unsettling confidence. Trying to confirm what he is seeing, Aoto asks whether Ichino-sensei is actually a man, and Ichino-sensei flatly admits it. Still reeling, Aoto points at the odd sweater and pants, questioning the bizarre outfit. Ichino-sensei, strangely pleased with himself, brushes it off by saying it is just a hobby. Aoto stares in disbelief and realizes Ichino-sensei plans to attend the first signing of his life disguised with a wig and a feminine outfit. When asked if that is really true, Ichino-sensei confirms it, and Aoto can only repeat in disbelief that this is really the plan. Ichino-sensei proudly explains that by dressing as a woman, he can secretly handle both the autograph session and the outing without being recognized. Overwhelmed, Aoto collapses in despair and begs him to stop, saying people can laugh all they want. But this is ruining his life. Aoto demands to know what kind of emergency could possibly force someone to dress as a woman when his life is supposedly on the line. Fighting back tears, the woman says she cannot tell him the reason. The situation all of a sudden turns chaotic as Aoto lunges forward and the tension spikes even higher. Ichino-sensei urgently tells Yoshizawa to calm down, while Aoto is still too shaken to process any of it. Aoto panics internally, thinking he cannot stay calm after learning his favorite new author showed up to a first book signing disguised as a woman, and he blurts out that he cannot argue with that. He realizes he cannot reveal the truth, because if his sister-in-law learned Yoshizawa had been pressuring him every day, she would turn it into material. Trying to defuse the moment, he awkwardly says he does kickboxing and calls it good exercise, while she asks what his specialty is. As the pressure tightens, he hurriedly says he will talk and begs her to lower her leg after she mentions a jumping knee strike. Night falls over the city as the scene shifts outside beneath a bright moon. Still rattled, he laughs nervously and says he cannot believe his sister-in-law actually tried to pressure him at school every day, leaving the other person stunned and asking what is wrong. Fighting back tears, Yoshizawa bitterly asks whether Aoto is laughing at her awful disguise if this is somehow not the kind of thing he should be laughing at. From across the room, Aoto hesitantly gives in and says he will cooperate, still sounding completely lost. Relieved, Yoshizawa says Ichino-sensei promised to help so his sister-in-law will not discover who he really is, and she thanks him sincerely. Ichino-sensei notes that things are getting even more interesting, while Aoto realizes the girl nearly let something slip and concludes he has to help since Ichino-sensei asked him to. Ichino-sensei calmly tells them to begin by taking a seat, and Aoto awkwardly agrees. As Yoshizawa all of a sudden leans in close and tells him not to move, Aoto freezes and urgently tells her to wait. In a tense and deeply awkward moment, she admits this is difficult for her and asks him to stay calm. Overwhelmed by the pressure, Aoto snaps and tells her to get lost. Realizing how harsh that sounded, Aoto quickly apologizes and says he was startled so it came out wrong, then awkwardly rephrases it and nervously wonders if he made things worse. Trying to steady the moment, Yoshizawa tells him not to misunderstand because she only plans to put on some makeup, have him close his eyes, and ask him to play along, leaving him weakly agreeing. Aoto steadies himself, says that sounds a little better now, and agrees to continue. Yoshizawa panics as she realizes the makeup has made her look convincing, and the thought leaves her flustered and embarrassed. Hearing that it is almost time for the book signing, Yoshizawa says she will get going, while Aoto gives a hesitant acknowledgement. Slipping into the role, Yoshizawa softly says she understands. Aoto is thrown off by her unexpectedly girlish voice, and Yoshizawa hurriedly explains she is doing it because using a male voice would give her away. Put off by the sudden act, Aoto bluntly calls it gross, and Yoshizawa erupts in shock at his reaction. Ichino-sensei steps in like an announcer and declares that the free autograph session celebrating the completion of Kataimo will now begin. As the event begins, Aoto quietly admits he is getting seriously nervous, and Yoshizawa looks overwhelmed too. Fighting down her anxiety, Yoshizawa reminds herself that even if cross-dressing is unusual, the readers who supported her work for years came to see her, so she has to smile, stay composed, thank them, and sign the final volume. Spotting the first attendee, Yoshizawa urgently calls for Ichino-sensei because the first one is coming, then braces herself and says she is ready. Yoshizawa greets the attendee and politely thanks her for coming to the autograph session. As she faces the visitor, Yoshizawa hesitates and nervously begins to speak about today. The girl looks over in surprise, while Yoshizawa is stunned by the misunderstanding around Ichino-sensei. Flustered and sweating, Yoshizawa blurts out in disbelief and asks why she is at this book signing. Aoto realizes that the visitor is Rinko, an otaku girl who loves manga, anime, and even light novels, though her favorite stories are limited to romantic comedies where the characters are childhood friends. He recalls that long ago he had recommended a book he wrote himself to her, and it had been split into 2 volumes. Panicking, Yoshizawa asks Ichino-sensei whether he knows this person, while Aoto desperately denies it and insists this is their first meeting. Rinko calmly confirms that, yes, this is their first meeting. Rinko asks them to please give her the book, and Yoshizawa hurriedly agrees to sign it as fast as possible. Before handing it over, Rinko quietly stops them and asks if she can ask a question, leaving Yoshizawa startled. As Rinko smiles, Yoshizawa panics internally and fears her identity may have already been exposed, then nervously asks what the question is. Yoshizawa tries to calm herself, reminding herself that with the dark wig and Yoshizawa-sensei's makeup she looks different enough, and she reasons that if Rinko is still asking questions, then she probably is not certain yet. Forcing herself to stay steady, Yoshizawa inwardly urges Rinko to ask anything because she is determined to answer without hesitation. Rinko all of a sudden asks whether Ichino-sensei has a very cute sister-in-law, and the question lands like a shock. Looking delighted, Rinko repeats the question with confidence and suggests that Ichino-sensei might have a very cute sister-in-law. Yoshizawa nearly breaks down, insists there is no one like that here, and reacts as if even the name Ichino-sensei has become dangerously loaded. Aoto, clearly uneasy, admits that he does not understand what Rinko is trying to do. As Rinko starts to walk away, Aoto quietly asks her not to push this too far, alarmed by where it could lead. Rinko turns back with a calm smile and asks what he means, pressing him to explain himself. Rinko cheerfully says she is sorry for taking up so much of Ichino-sensei's time, adds that she is happy to have met her before leaving, and Yoshizawa is left stunned that Rinko apparently did not expose anything. Yoshizawa is shaken to the core and silently wonders how much of her identity Rinko recognized. Rinko casually says she will see them soon and heads off, while Yoshizawa remains seated and tense in the signing area. Away from the table, Yoshizawa anxiously asks Ichino-sensei how much he knows about that person, clearly rattled by Rinko's behavior. She forces herself to believe Rinko is only a childhood friend who would not know she is the writer, then tells herself it was probably just a coincidence and that Rinko must have been in a hurry. Yoshizawa all of a sudden laughs in relief, then awkwardly denies anything is wrong when someone asks what amused her. As evening falls, the event wraps up, and Ichino-sensei is told that the next visitor will be the last one before he thanks them politely. Aoto grows uneasy and wonders if she is really coming, then tries to brush it off by saying that supposed cute sister-in-law talk might have been nothing more than Ichino-sensei's fantasy, and maybe she will not come at all. Yoshizawa desperately prays for the whole thing to end as just an incident, convincing herself the autograph session is not important to her because she is far more worried about the unfinished manuscript and the trip to the restroom. A staff member calls someone over and says to come this way, and at that exact moment, Yoshizawa notices movement and reacts in alarm. The girl appears holding a book and calmly says of course she has come, leaving Yoshizawa frozen as the pressure crashes back down. The weight of the moment lingers without relief. The tense moment continues without changing the core event. The scene stays frozen in an uneasy stillness. The situation remains unresolved as the pressure keeps building. The interaction leaves both of them deeply unsettled. The moment holds its weight without any clear shift,